This is my first signing, my first event like this.
Oh, wow. So
yeah.
What do you think of it so far?
I'm enjoying myself. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about your career.
Okay.
And obviously we're in the Star Wars zone, so we will focus on the galaxy far, far away.
Right.
How did and when did you first get into the Star Wars era of your career?
Well, let's see. I started at ILM as a model maker back in, very first time was 1988, but then steadily on from about 1990. But that was sort of that doldrums where there wasn't any Star Wars pictures being made. And so there was a period of time there that I actually ended up working out at the archives, out at the Lucasfilm archives out at Skywalker Ranch. And so during that period of time, I did a lot of, we did character appearances. So if, say, Darth Vader needed to be in a commercial or in a movie insert, or R2-D2 needed to make an appearance, C-3PO, I was doing a lot of the character appearances.
Yeah.
But I had an art background. I was a model maker. I'd started in the model shop. And then I went back to the model shop from being the archivist in about 1996, 5 or 6. And that was sort of like just leading up to the special editions.
Yeah.
So then obviously, but when I came back to the model shop for a while, I was the assistant manager of the model department, which was a lot less hands-on.
Yeah.
And
didn't that satisfy your creative?
Nah, it didn't really. I mean, it was okay. I knew I was contributing, but I couldn't really wait to get back to the point of actually making stuff. So. So for Phantom Menace, I kind of helped Steve Gawley, our chief model maker, supervisor of Phantom Menace, and then later got more involved in the making of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
But I kind of skipped right over the special editions. Special editions, I got to do several characters myself.
So how did that come about? Off the back of the other appearances?
Probably because of my connection with the archives and with Don Bees.
Yeah.
So they needed to do several insert shots of characters. They were, for one thing, in A New Hope special edition, they wanted to increase the number of stormtroopers that Han Solo is confronted with when he's running down the corridor of the Death Star. So we were stormtroopers for that.
So here's a question. You've made me think of something. So when they filmed that shot, obviously, famously, originally it's half a dozen stormtroopers. In the special edition, there's about 50.
Yeah.
Was it? It wasn't 50 different
no,
guys,
I think there might have been about 4 or 6 of us at
So
most.
Technically you played 7 different stormtroopers.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So they digitally reproduced us over. And same thing with, I was also an Imperial officer up in the background, like in the control area. And again, I probably was digitally reproduced more than once. I'm not sure. So I did that, and then and then I was Boba Fett I was a Rhodian musician in the what they call the Jedi Rock sequence. And so we kind of kicked the whole number off with the horn section. And again, that's Don Bees and myself.
Yeah.
And then they had a couple of insert shots. Don did the Boba Fett where he taps the dancer on the cheek, and then I'm the one who's kind of silently patrolling Jabba's palace after everybody's kind of snoozing and gone to sleep, and walking behind Jabba. So, so that's what I did for those. Now, there's another scene I did that I think may be little known. It's you don't see my face, but in Star Wars: A New Hope, when Luke is going to board the X-wing fighter, George wanted to tweak a little. He wanted to shorten, I think, a little bit of the dialogue between he and his friend Biggs, or something. And so R2 is being lifted into the X-wing behind us, and they needed some because they were going to make a little editing cut of sound. They didn't want it to look like R2 suddenly went like this. So they had me walk in front of the screen. I'm basically a human wipe. I'm in a brown jumpsuit with hose coiled over my shoulder, walking across screen and providing an editing moment. So
you're a human wipe?
I'm a human wipe, yeah.
So when these opportunities came along, how did they specifically come to you? Obviously, Don famously worked in the archive.
Yeah.
See the process, get that crew, get that team.
I think because both Don and I had been archivists, we had a lot of familiarity with handling the costumes and being in costume ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think it was that connection because we knew how to get in and out of the costumes. We had a wardrobe person help us at the time. You always needed outside help, but just sort of the knowledge of being in the costumes. And then, I like to think we acted halfway decently anyway.
You certainly did.
To pull it off. So,
what was the tone of that at the time in ILM, especially because it felt obviously George had announced Phantom Menace and the prequel trilogy.
Right.
Get the original films out there again for a new audience of people, see them on the big screen.
Right.
But it did kind of feel to a degree, in a good way, it was a great platform for ILM to introduce the high-level effects, to add these new sequences in.
Right.
So when you were working in these new elements,
Yeah.
how did it feel to you, knowing that you're ILM and there's this history, lineage that started with stuff?
Well, it was an exciting time. It was an exciting time for me because, like I said, I had worked at ILM for a number of years already during a period when there wasn't much happening on the Star Wars front.
Yeah.
It was other things that we were doing. So when the special editions came along, it was very exciting. And then with that knowledge that on the heels of the release of those, we were going to be launching a whole new series of episodes. For the new trilogy.
It was an exciting time.
Yeah.
In that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting.
You mentioned that you've been at ILM for a while. What projects did you work on early days?
In the earlier days, well, let me think back. There was a movie that I actually appeared on screen. Another opportunity to have an on-screen moment that I don't know. Maybe I don't think a ton of people saw, but it was called Fire in the Sky.
Yeah.
And it was an alien abduction film about a guy. It's based on a true story about a guy in Arizona that gets abducted and taken up in a spaceship. And when D.B. Sweeney plays the main actor in that, and he was a bit claustrophobic, and there was this whole long scene where the character is going to have to be put on a table under a rubber sheet and operated on by the aliens. And so I looked enough like him in terms of skin tone, body hair color, eye color, that they said, "Hey, how about you?" So I got to do that, and that was a long sequence of not needing to genuinely act as much as be terrified, because it was terrifying being under this rubber sheet and having alien arms doing their thing on me. So there was that. But let me think. What else did we work on in that period? And there was a long period in that time where I was also the archivist, so I wasn't really working on films. It seems like I had a bigger career with working on films as a model maker sort of after I came back from the archives.
Okay, yeah. So, one thing I always find a bit of technical trouble.
Sure.
Are we still on? Oh, there we go. One of the things I always enjoy talking to ILM guys is there you go. One of the things I always enjoy talking to you guys is that the hands-on element of problem solving. So I spoke to Lorne Peterson recently, and we talked about, Wild Wild West, when you got to figure out how to make the boulders fall over. Is that something that you always found interesting, working as a model maker as well? It's got to fit in. It's got to be a part of a massive jigsaw. Do you find that part of it interesting to do?
Definitely. That was the challenge of my job that I loved, and I think that we all loved that worked in that area, because I never felt like I was going to work to do the same old every day. We were always doing something different. Okay, this time we've got to make a pirate ship do this, and then next time we got to make a spaceship do that, and then we've got to do a huge landscape model, and then we've got to make some event happen, and so it wasn't just model making; it was part engineering. A lot of technical stuff went into it too, and of course, that goes beyond even the scope of we model makers. I mean, a lot of times some of our amazing riggers and stagehands and things like that don't get the credit they deserve, but they did an amazing job on a lot of that stuff as well to make that all happen. I'll interview you.
That sounds good. I've never been interviewed. So you say you went from the special edition era up to, I like this, up to Phantom Menace, obviously, which was massive in terms of model making. I mean, I think it wasn't that bigger than the original trilogy combined. And then Attack of the Clones. So what work did you do on Attack of the Clones?
So for Attack of the Clones, I primarily worked on humongous set miniatures. So, for example, the Executioner's Arena, and let's see what else. No, the Utapau sinkhole, was that? That's Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, they start to run together for me a little bit. But yeah, we did some of the just the stuff on the planet with the termite-like creatures, and the various planetscapes and things like that. Oh, how about Polis Massa, where Yoda goes off to flee? That was Sith as well. Okay, they're running together for me a little bit. I apologize. I should know better. But
how did it work then with the model shop? Obviously, the way George did it was 3-year cycles and such, so you were pretty much starting on the next one before the previous one had even been released. So where's the demarcation line for you guys between finishing one and starting the next one, or is there?
Well, for us, there was, typically for the model shop, I mean, I think there was some overlap in some of the creative departments, the art department and so forth, but for the model shop, we really didn't overlap in terms of our work. I mean, when we were working on Attack of the Clones, we were working on Attack of the Clones, and then there was typically maybe a 6-month break or something, and then we would start working on Revenge of the Sith or that type of thing. So, yeah.
I suppose in that instance, each individual film is essentially its own production company, isn't it? So you've got to have that break-off point. Yeah. So what of that era then? Because the prequel era visually is just so beautiful. What interested you the most? What made you the happiest when it came out on screen of the work that you did? You mentioned Utapau, and again, that's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work.
Right. Yeah, I think. Well, I was very proud of how the Utapau sinkhole came up. There were four sculptors primarily that worked on that, and I was one of them. Also, the Executioner's Arena, we had a bigger team of sculptors on that. So that was, that made me pretty happy too. I guess we show certain proclivities, and you kind of end up getting I wouldn't say pigeonholed is quite the right word, but, because you do something well in a certain instance, you kind of get asked to do that again. And so I ended up doing a lot of foam carving for some of those sets. And although we did a lot of clay detailing as well on the Utapau sinkhole, for instance.
So as movies move on and techniques move on, how much of a difference does that make to you as a model maker? Because obviously from when you started out in late 80s to more recently, techniques change, but also materials change. Does that have a big effect on the way you work, the speed of the work that you do?
Maybe. I mean, the materials didn't change too drastically for us. Technology didn't change in that area so much. Probably, we were... in some ways, it may have generated a little more work for a period there because we were making more things for the digital department, for like maquettes and study models and things like that maybe we didn't necessarily make before. And but for us, the materials tended to stay roughly the same throughout the process.
That's an interesting thought. You say study models. So is there an awful lot of work that you do that we, or certainly people that go to the cinema, would never see?
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, using the Executioner's Arena from Attack of the Clones is an example. We made a study model that kind of came together as like a jigsaw puzzle. And so, yeah, it was... that way they could sort of set it up, open up pieces of it, see how camera perspectives would look and that sort of thing. I think I just remembered, unless I'm mixing movies again, that I also worked on some of the building miniatures from the Coruscant, or like Dell's, what was it, the diner, Dexter's Diner, and some of those street scenes and that sort of thing. So
that's quite significantly stylistically different. I mean, that's got that 50s retro. Lucas loved all that, didn't he? You know, that 50s retro look compared to the dugout holes of Geonosis and places like that. Yeah. That must be fascinating to mix it up and do these different things.
Yeah, it is, and that's again the part I loved about the job, was that it was always different. You know, it was always different to go from making very clean models, you know, buildings and that sort of thing, versus like you say, very organic landscapes that look like kind of dugout holes, as you said, or that kind of thing, caves and such, things that look like they've been made by termites. Yeah, it was very different.
So I noticed when I did my research that you had a hand in operating R2-D2 at certain junctures.
Yeah, I did. I believe that I may have only operated R2 for one scene in one of the movies. It was one of the, I want to say it was maybe Attack of the Clones, but where R2 is going across a battlefield, maybe after the Jedis have all fallen or something. It was just a barren scene. But I did a lot of R2-D2 handling and operating for live appearances and for some commercials and special appearances and that kind of thing. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It was always it could be a little nerve-wracking at times, but just because logistically you had to be, you know, I mean, there were some big profile appearances where I had to operate R2. For example, like the Oprah Winfrey show, when she had all the special appearance guests there, and I don't know, situations with George, when George was getting his star on, you know, the Walk of Fame, Hollywood, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it can be a little nerve-wracking because you want to make sure it's live. There's no redo. You can't do. It's not like take two, you know.
And I noticed also Lucasfilm related still that you worked on Crystal Skull. You worked on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah. And that was another big foam carving thing where I did where we did the temple, the old temple, the pyramidal shape, and we had, I don't know, maybe a crew of about 8 or 10 of us carving and detailing for a number of weeks.
And I say again, another big return, like the special editions was Return of Star Wars before the prequels. Indy, big return there, and again that was a pretty big model job as well, wasn't it, on Crystal Skull? Yeah,
I mean, I can't recall exactly what else we all worked on during that, but our main contribution was the temple. There was they did at ILM. They did the, or actually, I don't know if it was ILM. We might have been Kerner Optical by then, but they did the miniature, like 50s city where the nuclear blast test. So they had, you know, basically an empty city with just houses and cars and, you know, all that kind of thing. And so they did quite a big set with that.
So if you look back at the career that you've had as a model maker specifically, and it's always moments, which moments in terms of the work that you did on set that got presented to the director, and then on screen when all the other elements are added with the music and all the other bits, which moments would you look at and go, yeah, we really nailed that one?
I was, again, really, really pleased with how the Executioner's Arena came, because it was a big, I mean, as a miniature, it was a miniature technically, but it goes from here to where the camera is. That's how big that set piece was across. And I thought it read really well on film, and we pulled that off very well. Same thing with the Utapau sinkhole. That was about 16 meters deep, and it was made in sections, and we actually put it on its side on stage to be able to film it, and they would drive a motion control camera down the middle of it to get the sequences in there. So those two stick out.
So you mentioned it's like a bigature, isn't it? Really, you know that you know from concept to delivery. What sort of timescale are you looking at?
Well, for models of that scope, like the Utapau sinkhole and Executioner's Arena, from concept when we get some two-dimensional art from the art department and start planning it, and then we have to build a frame, a structure to accept the detail parts that we're gonna carve on there, and then it finally goes to stage. It's anywhere from like a 4 to 6 month stretch of time.
So what occupies your time these days? What occupies your time these days?
Well, there was a group of us, since we don't really do practical models and creatures in film anymore. There are several of us from the old model shop and creature shop have kind of spun off into a company known as Trauma Effects Solutions, and we make it's not movie related. We make high-end trauma training mannequins primarily for the military. So these are mannequins that have like maybe shrapnel wounds and maybe an amputated or blown off limb. They can bleed, they can breathe, you can take their pulse, you can intubate them. So these are tools for soldiers and combat medics and those sort of thing, people to be able to save lives out on the battlefield. And so that's primarily what we're doing.
And what was the inspiration for that? That's a fascinating step away from what you were doing before.
I believe the way the story goes is that it came about, it was during the Kerner Optical period, and what happened was some people, maybe from the government, approached Jamie Heineman of Mythbusters fame and asked him about the plausibility of doing something like this, feasibility of doing something like this. And, he was way too busy with his TV show and with Mythbusters, and he said, well, I can't do it, but I might know some folks who can. And so it came to Kerner Optical, and it was a Kerner Optical project during its development. And then it quickly, as it started to get legs and work out, then eventually Kerner Optical wasn't working out financially, so that kind of went belly up. And then, but this company formed to do these trauma dummies because they were, they actually had a viability.
Are you still based in the Bay Area? You're still in that part of the world?
Yeah, I am. Still live in the North Bay and love it there. It's home. It's where I grew up. So, yeah.
And so you say this is your first convention, so is there hopes and plans to do more? Because I think there's a wonderful nostalgia for ILM, certainly from Star Wars fans, but beyond, obviously, Trek and Indy and everything else. And there's so many stories, so would there be a hope that you could get out there more and tell more stories?
Yeah, I think so. I'm enjoying it, and I love that. I love the fact that that there are so many fans, and they held what we did in high regard, because I know we felt it was special at the time, and it's nice to know that what you're doing, has kind of a lasting value for people. And so, yeah, I could see myself doing more of these kinds of things.
Well, we'll certainly be interested when you do. Can you give us a big round of applause, please, for Nelson Hall?
Thanks very much.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe. You can push the button in the middle there, and there's a couple of other videos you can have a watch of as well. But please subscribe, it really helps.